後にします。
いろんなデモがあるね。
そうだね。これからロンドンで行われているウクライナデモへ。
Weapons and why they need to arm Ukraine now.
Смуток і трагедію в нашій оселі.
And in the end of the day, weapons is just piece of iron. It actually cannot be equal to lives the Ukraine sacrificing now at the moment.
Мы бы так бы играли, но хочется домой, хочется солнца. Здравствуйте, мы тут я увидел, что вы пришли, вот хотел бы просто сказать. Мы вот очень хотим вернуться все домой, хотим вернуться живые, хотим увидеть своих родителей, родных.
Какие вы дали вообще тут уже?
2 месяца.
2 месяца? Ага. И сколько дней уже насчитаете?
Яっぱりウクライナ人とか現地の人が多いのかな、なんか日本の渋谷のデモの時の方がもちろん日本人が一番多かったけど、なんかいろんな人種の人がいた、いろんな国旗を持ったね。でもさっきなんかウクライナ語でさみんなで行った時すごい多いんだなウクライナ人。もうどんどん集まってきてる。アジア人一人もいないし、黒人もフォトグラファーの人が一人だったから。
アジア人確かに俺らしかいなかった。
いなかったね。まあそういう風に言ってる記事もあるよね。この問題はそのウクライナで白人の人たちだからヨーロッパ人は気にしてるっていう見方をしてる人もいる。本当って思ったけど、なんかちょっとだけ分かったような気もしたりしなかったり。
I study politics and international relations here in London at UCL. I'm originally Irish, but I grew up in Belgium, so I've got international background.
Oh, really international.
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously I was a lot more, I think, in tune with the news when Russia first invaded Ukraine, just by virtue of being a politics student. Like, we were immediately immersed in it in classes. We started talking about it and all this stuff because, like, as politics students, we're very, I think, aware of current events, whether that's in Palestine or Yemen, or like you're kind of assumed to know about like the world and what's going on around you. But I think because we're in Europe, this is the first time in like years and years and years that we've had a war in Europe as well.
Yeah.
So
At
it kind
the
of
moment, right?
happening right now.
Yeah.
Like the last time there was a war on this continent, I guess, was like the Second World War.
Yeah.
So
That's
even
so
though
sad.
like wars happen all the time, it felt very personal that this war was happening like on our continent, especially when we go to university with Russians or Ukrainians. So it felt very personal, which I think is what made it different from other political events that are going on right now.
Right.
Although there was a lot of, like, some people felt offended on the other hand that we didn't talk as much about other issues as we talk about the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
That's the topic that's going on in Japan too.
It's the same that happened here.
About what's going on in Afghanistan. And
exactly,
like
stuff like
some
that.
Other countries too.
Exactly, and a lot of people perceived it as sort of like white superiority. Like maybe we only care about the war in Ukraine because we recognize them as white Europeans, and therefore we think they're more worth being saved than, for instance, Middle Easterns that are in Palestine or Yemen or Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So even though it felt very personal that it was a European war, I think we were also conscious of the fact that we need to sort of care about other issues as much as we care about the war that's going on right now.
I was just wondering if you guys still discuss about it in class, you know, or was it like an on-time, you know, like topic?
I think kind of like most events, like political events, whether it's what happened in Afghanistan in the fall with the Taliban or whether it's Russia invading Ukraine, events are very short-lived in the media. Like, it was a massive thing for the first 2 or 3 weeks, and now everyone's kind of gone on with their lives.
So it's like that in the UK?
That's how it feels to me, even though I study politics and I'm always surrounded by people who are interested in these things.
I think exact same thing is going on in Japan as well, so that's why we're filming this documentary. What's happening in the Ukraine is like horrible, but I personally feel like even watching the news on TV or like even just online, like that affects your mental health too.
Yeah, for sure.
What do you think about that?
I think it's true, but I also think it's really is testament to how privileged we are to live in a world where if we want to turn off the news, then we don't have to think about the war anymore. Like some people are immersed in lives where no matter how much money you have or how much privilege you have, you're faced with the reality of war. Yeah. And so the fact for me that if I become too overwhelmed, I can just close the BBC News tab and go about my life feels very like I feel like I'm abusing a privilege that I have to be able to do that. So I think when it comes to younger children, obviously censoring like gruesome photos and images, I absolutely believe in that. But I think we should be wary of becoming too desensitized to war because it's something that people face, and in order to like sympathize with that, we need to be able to confront it.
I'm 18. I'm from Taiwan.
And I heard that you studied in China as well?
Yes. I basically grew up in China.
Oh, nice. Cool. So, how is Taiwanese people reacting to the news lately?
I think the Taiwanese people is like they're probably scared in the sense of that because Russia's action to Ukraine is kind of closely resembles what China could possibly do to Taiwan, right. Which has always been a concern for Taiwanese citizens. And that is,
and after happening to Hong Kong, right?
Yeah. And also the Hong Kong thing is also China has Taiwanese people have been paying close attention to that, and that's also been on their mind.
Right, yeah. Right. Your parents are still in Taiwan?
No, in China.
In China.
They're in Shanghai.
There's no too much news going on about Ukraine in China?
Yeah, I mean, in China there's still censorship, so I doubt there's much information going on about Russia's invasion on Ukraine, or at least it won't be phrased as an invasion, but there's people probably know, but it's twisted to some extent.
How are you as an international student studying in the UK handling this news?
To me, like...
You could be honest.
To me, I think what's happening in Russia is definitely scary because China could possibly do the same thing, which is like disregarding the fact of whether Taiwan is part of China or not. Like the loss of life with like it's definitely going to occur with war, and that is obviously not something I want or probably anybody wants. So to me, like the fact that it's actually happening like in Ukraine, that people are dying due to another country coming in is scary.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm a third-year student in UCL. I'm studying history, politics, and economics. Currently trying to graduate. With everything, it's a bit difficult. But
I know it's your exam season. Thank you so much for the interview.
It's fine, thank you for interviewing me. But when the war started, I was in Ukraine. I was in Kiev.
You were?
Yeah. On 24th of February. I went there for my little brother's birthday on 22nd of February, and I was supposed to leave on 24th. But then basically I woke up to bombs at 6 a.m.
You woke up to bombs?
Yeah, because we live next to Bristol, which is the airport. It's one of the hugest airports. Right. Yeah.
I'm getting goosebumps right now. I'm getting cold.
Yeah. I didn't realize it was bombs because it was like a large kind of, not a large, but like a loud noise. But I always thought like, you know those noises that you think, oh, it's just a plane flying by. But then it was a repeated noise over and over again. So I just remember explicitly that my first reaction, because I didn't have a flight booked back to London, I was like, you know what, this is getting a bit too scary. I'm gonna book a flight back. And I book a flight, and it's like 5 or 6 a.m. just when the explosion started. And I go back to bed because they stopped for a bit. And then my mom runs back into my room half an hour later, screaming, "We have to get out! We have to get out! They're bombing the place." So we got into the not into the taxi, but in the car with the driver, because we have a driver in Ukraine, and we're just stuck in traffic. So it's me, my mom, my dad, and my two younger brothers, and my whole family is in Ukraine. So I have my older brother, my older sister, and their families all there. I mean, originally I'm from Ukraine, so it gets even more messy because I was born Ukrainian, but now half of my family is Russian because Crimea is Russian. So half of my family is on the other side, and we don't know what's happening to them either, because they cut off like the broadband, so we can't call them, and we can't really ask like what's happening.
So when was the last time you communicated with them?
It depends who. One of my cousins, he's currently in the army for the Russian side, because he was on a contract. Yeah, they forced him to go into Ukraine, so they told him it's a training, and then he just ended up in Ukraine. And we haven't heard from him since the war started. We just know that he is there. And his wife, no one else like heard from him since then. So that's like one of the stories. And then other than that, well, we sat in the car, went into traffic, and usually the road from Kyiv to Lviv, which is like the safe city, it takes approximately 6 to 7 hours, depending on, you know, the road and everything. It took us 48 hours to get to Lviv because the car just wouldn't move. And then we thought, like, what's the closest border? Because, like, the news were always on. We tried to maintain, like, you know, knowing where the tanks were, etc. Because it's, like, Kyiv is quite close to the Belarus border. So we were kind of scared that from the Belarus, they would try to, like, kind of come into the road, you know? I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit emotional
It's
because...
okay. Let me give you a cut.
Okay. No, it's okay, don't worry. I'm fine with it now. It's, like, it's good. But, yeah, it was quite kind of scary, especially because my younger brother is, like, 5 years old. So throughout the whole experience, I was trying to be like, okay, it's a game, we have to go through this and it's gonna be fine after.
He didn't know what was going on.
No, of course not. Well, the worst part is that kind of my dad has some connections in the political sphere because he was a politician before. No one he spoke to on the Belarus side, Russian side, Ukrainian side expected anything. So it was almost like no one knew, literally no one. Because he knows some of the people who are very high up in the military, and they also didn't expect any of this to happen.
So it's sudden, like you didn't have any notice before. It was
No.
24th, February 24th.
Yeah, 6 a.m.
in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
No notice.
No, nothing. And literally no one knew what on earth is happening. I remember checking the news, nothing. When it happened, there was nothing available. So I was just like, okay, I'm just making it up because, you know, there was a lot of news about, you know, 100,000 troops on the border. Everyone was freaking out already, but everyone was like, yeah, it's nothing serious. It's nothing serious. So I told myself that, and then when the loud noises happened, I'm like, I'm just telling myself that it's not real. It's not going to happen. It was real. But yeah, so within those 48 hours to get to Lviv.
You were driving?
Yeah, we had a driver with us.
Okay,
and yeah, and I mean, I'm very thankful because my dad is above 60 because all of the men have to stay in the country if they're below 60. And the driver was below 60. So we knew that at some point we have to leave the car because he wouldn't be able to leave the country. So border with Poland, it was the nearest border to Przemysl.
That's when we went.
Yeah. So we decided to go there because it was the closest one. We were basically in the queue to that border. The last 10 kilometers, it took us a day and a half. We were just standing there and it was just not moving in the car. Yeah, and then the problem was, well, one of them was that the petrol stations would limit the petrol 20 liters per car at a time. And there was no petrol stations at the finishing lines on the border. So we couldn't really keep going like that because our car would just not drive at some point, you know, it would just run out of gas. So we decided to basically walk the last 15 kilometers and that's what we did. And then we walked.
All your stuff?
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah. I mean, we basically didn't have any stuff because we had to pack in 5 to 10 minutes. Because there were sirens all around Kyiv and they were like, oh, we're gonna get bombed, we have to run. And we live on the 24th floor in Kyiv, which meant that if we don't get out and we get bombed, that's it, you know, 24th floor, you're not gonna jump. You can't really do much. So we decided that's it. We're just gonna leave, passports, money, that's it. And then on the border, while we were walking, my parents have some health issues. So because my dad is, you know, 68 years old, kind of makes sense. We realized that we wouldn't be able to walk for a long time. We walked to the border and there's just thousands of people, literally standing like this. They can't breathe, they cannot move. There's kids, there's literally babies. I remember that so explicitly. And we walked towards that crowd and there's a woman, a man and a small baby on her hands walking towards us. And we're asking, how long did you stand there? How come you're coming back, you know? She was like, we stood here for the whole night and before that approximately 10 hours in the day and we just didn't move. So we're turning back because we can't do this anymore. And at that point I'm just like, in my head, I'm like, oh my god, there's no chance my parents are gonna go through this and wait for a whole day. Like, there's just no chance. And my baby brother, no chance. So yeah, that was my thought. And then we found some bus that was basically going from one of the towns in Ukraine to Poland. And we managed to get on it because, I don't know, I was just literally asking every guy I could find in the crowd, because my thinking behind it was that there should be someone who knows someone in that bus, right? So yeah, we basically went into the bus. The bus was aimed for 45 to 55 people. There was 150 people on that bus. When I say we couldn't breathe, we really couldn't breathe. And we couldn't open the windows because, like, it sounds really scary, but it was just, like, when I think about it, I can't believe it's actually true, because we couldn't open the windows because the crowd outside was so intense that we were scared that someone would try to break the windows and get in.
That's how intense it was.
Yes, it was like, when I'm telling you, it was like this. And in front of us in the bus, there was 2 boys that were turning 18 on the day, and they just turned them around. Yeah, that was the saddest part. Like, they had to go all the way back by themselves, and there was like nothing. Like, yeah. In terms of a message for the people who are not in Ukraine, is, as a person who evacuated and was lucky enough to not see what is actually happening in the war, so I am definitely very lucky because I'm right now in London and I know my family's safe. At least most of them are. And I know that a lot, I would say majority of the people in Ukraine, especially cities like Mariupol, are not. And so my message would be that instead of trying to justify why this is happening, because a lot of the people who texted me after I posted on my stories, on my posts, like, look, this is what's happening, they were trying to justify it by being, look, Ukraine could have joined NATO. That would be a direct kind of threat to Russia. Or Ukraine had it coming because they're all Nazis, or they're against Russians. None of that is true, because I was born in Crimea. I spoke Russian my whole life. There was never a case where I was judged based off the fact that I speak Russian in Ukraine, and I've been all over Ukraine. Never in my life. The only time I was actually asked about my political beliefs was when I was going to Moscow in 2019, visiting my friend. On the border, I got asked, so you're from Crimea, where do you think Crimea should belong? That kind of thing. So, what would you say? Oh, to Russia, I said, oh, it's Russian. Because I knew that if I would say anything else, it was just,
Not a good idea.
Yeah, I would rather not. But overall, I would say, just like, instead of trying to justify what Russia is doing, or trying to kind of move on from the topic, because I know if a lot of people are like, look, it's a war, but ultimately we need to focus on our lives, etc. Yes, we do have to focus on our lives, but we also have to remember that this is very close and it can happen to anyone. And based on the response that Russians have been given, not Putin, not politicians, but people who I know and who I spoke to in real life, it's closer than a lot of people think, because it's not only Putin who thinks like that, and there's a lot of support. So if there was something that I would want to say to the younger people and to the generations, is to be aware of what is happening and make sure that you're listening to the news that are legit. And it's very difficult right now.
It is difficult. Do you have any message for internationals or like Japanese viewers?
Thank you for your support. And yeah, it's great to know that so many countries support us, and I guess it just gives the most hope, the fact that so many people know about it, because I know that a lot of conflicts around the world are not broadcasted in such a way, and I know a lot of the people, including people I know of friends, have found homes because of the people who are helping out Ukrainians, and that's something that is crucial, and yeah, I'll always be thankful for that.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's amazing. Thank you. Can I give you a hug,
Yeah, of
please?
course.
Thank you so much.